submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. I call this story The History of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Welcome back. Firstly, this week on my channel, I am kicking off Camping Horror Week. For those who may not know, every month I do a themed week, and this month is all about camping to kick off summer, of course. What a better way to do so than talking about one of the shows that caused me so much kinder trauma. Are You Afraid of the Dark? I so desperately yearned to be a part of the Midnight Society. I wanted to be the one sitting by the campfire telling spooky tales, but truth be told, every time I've been camping, it's been miserable. Can I tell you a little bit of a TMI story? If you don't like pee stories, you might want to skip ahead. Anyways, about 10 years ago now, I was camping for a wedding, which was an absolute disaster. Mind you, this was about 3 hours away from home in the middle of absolutely nowhere with a bunch of people who were there for the wedding, but I didn't really know. So, the first night there, I was just so overcome with fear. I was so scared in this tent. I was scared to go to the bathroom, to get out of the tent in this dark abyss of a forest to go to the bathroom. So I decided that it would make me feel safer if I just peed in a bowl in the tent. And I would just dump it out in the morning. No harm, no foul. Wrong. Only harm, only foul. I tripped and I fell and I spilled pee all over the tent. It was gross. It was horrific. But we're close friends here, so you get to hear all of the gross stuff. But anyways, I think this is a great time before we begin. Go ahead and give the Get Weird podcast a 5-star review, a comment, a like, whatever, wherever. And if you're only listening to the audio, pop over to my horror channel, Deadgrl Spookystar, to follow along with Camping Horror Movie Week. Let's begin. I have a core memory of Are You Afraid of the Dark from when I was about 7 or 8 years old. Every Friday night, my parents, when I was younger, they would go bowling. They were a part of a league. And most Friday nights, when they were gone, my uncle babysat me. And it was always the same kind of routine. He would come over, we'd listen to some music, mostly Pink Floyd. And then we would watch the guys doing the bull riding on TSN or whatever. And then, as soon as that was done, we would flip over to YTV, which perhaps may be specific to Canada, and we would watch the Are You Afraid of the Dark and Goosebumps combo. Now, if you're not familiar with Are You Afraid of the Dark, it's an anthology series that recounts ghost stories told by the members of the Midnight Society as they gather around a campfire. Now, each episode opens with members of the Midnight Society at their secret spot in the woods where they prepare their fire, and the night storyteller announces the title of his or her offering. The show's first episode was in 1992, and it went through to 2000, which means for me, it started a year before I was born, and by the time I started watching it, it was just in its last seasons. So I, like most kids in my generation, watched a lot of reruns, but that's okay because it was such a great show that even the reruns had the 9 p.m. Friday night spot here. It was co-produced by the Canadian production company Cinar and the American network Nickelodeon, and it was filmed primarily in Montreal, Quebec, and Vancouver, British Columbia. And I can definitely see British Columbia, like the forest, the national parks being a really great place to set the campfire tale aspect of the story. Now, I mentioned that this was on YTV in Canada and Nickelodeon in the US. This was pre-Dan Schneider downfall era, and so many people who have worked on this show and other shows around this time recall it being one of the most positive environments for child actors. There's an article I'll link in the description of one of the cast members, Russ Hull, who ended up being a huge familiar face, especially in Canadian TV. Anyways, he recounts his time on the show and how great it was to grow up in that era. He was quoted saying, "I was very lucky that our set was always so incredibly professional." And now he's a meteorologist for global news for my Canadian friends. How cool is that? He seems like a truly great guy. And someone on Reddit posted about the show, and I will quote this: "Well, it's nice to know that there is one piece of nostalgia we can all enjoy without having to side-eye the entire creative process." It is really nice to be able to have that little piece of horror nostalgia just for us, untainted by the predatory culture that is multiplied and was perpetuated so much after this show ended. Now, the brilliance of this series was its simple but extremely effective premise. Each episode centered around the Midnight Society, a group of teens who just gathered in the woods to share original scary stories around a campfire. And it made it feel so relatable to just see these young kids sharing stories with one another. Now, those stories took viewers everywhere, from haunted fun houses to cursed comic book stores and comic books, to vampires, to ghosts, to creatures lurking at the bottom of swimming pools. The show even borrowed elements from classic urban legends and the series like The Twilight Zone, but it's always maintained its own kind of identity. Even now, episodes like The Tale of Laughing in the Dark, The Tale of the Dead Man's Float, and The Tale of the Quicksilver are still remembered as some of the most genuinely terrifying experiences many horror fans remember and had as kids. Now, behind the scenes, the series became a huge launching pad for an impressive number of future stars, with actors like Ryan Gosling, Neve Campbell, Alicia Cuthbert, Hayden Christensen, and even Jay Baruchel. They all appeared in Are You Afraid of the Dark, I should say, before they became household names. And the original run of the show lasted from 1992 to 1996 before returning for a revival from 1999 to 2000, and the franchise found new life yet again through Nickelodeon's modern reboots beginning in 2019. But despite changing casts and evolving formats, the heart of the show remained the same, celebrating the thrill of storytelling and the excitement of being scared in a safe environment. Now, what makes Are You Afraid of the Dark so great is that it never talks down to its audience. It understood that fear is often our first introduction to empathy, to courage, to resilience, and for many of us, the series was a gateway into the lifelong love affair with horror, a stepping stone that led to late-night movie marathons, video store discoveries, and eventually all of the deep cuts and cult classics that we obsess over today. So, whether Zeebo the Clown still haunts your dreams, or you're just discovering the Midnight Society for the first time, one thing is certain: some of the best horror stories begin around a campfire, with a handful of midnight dust and a willingness to embrace the dark. And in saying all of that, thank you so much for being here for another week for 25 weeks. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for being weird. Stay strange, stay spooky, and this podcast episode has been submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society.